So hi guys, welcome back. Today we have something special in store for you guys. We're going to discuss mental health. And I think that considering the whole Corona situation, the whole working from home, the whole being cooped up in your house, but also the fact that we're all working in cybersecurity is actually mental health is a good topic to discuss today. So I'm here with my lovely ladies and with a special guest today, Andrew. I think you can introduce yourself a little bit later. But first, my name is Jennifer.
My name's Anne.
And my name is Faith.
And we're out of band. So Andrew, lovely to have you today. Would you maybe introduce yourself?
Sure, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'm Andrew Foster. I've been working in cybersecurity for a decade-ish, doing a bunch of different jobs. There's no real consistent theme or narrative to what I've done, other than it usually has something to do with threat intelligence. Mm-hmm. Started off in the US Navy, which is a great place for mental health. If that's important to you, I definitely would recommend a career in the military. And then, yeah, bounced around, worked at a SOC for a couple of years. Then I moved overseas and eventually found my way to IBM. So that's kind of the short version. But yeah, just random threat intelligence kind of jobs.
Very well. So we always do kind of a little bit of a pre-discussion also on why we want to discuss this topic. So for me personally, the reason why I would like to discuss mental health and everything around it is because, well, I unfortunately had a burnout. So I know the downsides of having a negative or minor mental health part. So maybe let's flip it a little bit around. What do we actually mean when we're discussing mental health?
I'm thinking it's a label that we kind of been hearing more and more about. And it was just something that struck me when you said, unfortunately, I had a burnout. So I had a burnout too. And I wouldn't say I would wish it on anybody. But now that I'm on the other side of it, I kind of look back on it and say, fortunately, I had a burnout, because it totally required me to revisit my outlook on everything, how I was doing everything. My relationships with other people, my relationship with myself, and it forced my hand in a very painful, very difficult, very uncomfortable way to change how I was living. And if I hadn't had that, I think I could have wandered my way through life, missing out on a whole bunch of stuff. And I'm not painting it rosy. It was really, really difficult, really painful, lonely, but kind of came out of it in a much better place. And it wasn't like bad and suddenly good. It was, ups and downs and messy and moving forward and then falling back and kind of going, God, am I ever going to feel good again? But I do remember my sister saying to me, and I called her sort of in great distress one night at 4 a.m. She was the only one who'd pick up the phone, and her saying to me, you will get through this and you'll look back on it and you will be glad it happened. And I remember thinking, Jesus, like, is she mental? Like, does she really not know what I'm going through at all? But she was right. But I just couldn't believe that when she said it to me. So mental health, sorry, that was a long ramble. Mental health is, I don't have a tidy definition for it. It's something that's universal, that we all have. Like, we all have our biology, we all have our minds. And it's kind of the relationship that we have with ourselves and the quality of that relationship, kind of our inner world, how healthy we are in that space, that conditions what we're able to do in the world around us and with other people. And my non-tidy definition of it is just kind of a reflection of it's very complex.
So my definition of mental health is it's just another illness. Just how someone can get pneumonia or malaria. It's an illness that is caused by certain situations And unfortunately for me, I can't really say that I've had the experience of mental health, maybe because of my cultural background. The words mental health don't really exist in my vocabulary, or if you say that, for us it was more of like, if you have mental health issues, it's more of like you know. So where else that was the case, right? I do think that I've reached, or I've had points in life when I was demotivated, completely demotivated, tired of everything, did not feel like doing anything, did not feel like I even wanted to wake up from my bed. And from the symptoms that I've seen going around about mental health, some of them seemed to have coincided. So I can't really say that I'm speaking from experience. However, I think that maybe I was at one point just closer to that situation, but I got out of it.
Yeah.
Andrew?
Andrew?
Sure.
Your take on it?
So mental health, especially in cybersecurity, for me, I see it as almost, it's an unavoidable situation. Like, take your average SOC analyst, right? Look at a SOC. Where does a SOC typically exist, right? Before Corona, you were in a windowless room, right? You were in the heart of the IT infrastructure. Anytime anything would go bad, you were in a windowless room. People would come in and start yelling, high stress, high levels of panic. Your job is to stare at a screen, reading lines of basically artifacts, right? Like, to a normal person that doesn't work in cybersecurity, this is magic. And not only is it magic, but you're understanding the language of the spells, right? It's incredibly difficult to understand. You're working on shift. You're, depending on the shift, you might be staring at a screen for 12 hours in a windowless room where you're getting yelled at. And not only that, the stuff you're looking at is almost guaranteed to be bad news.
Yeah.
Like, how could anyone survive that situation for a long period of time, right? It's when you're in cybersecurity, especially on the defensive side, it's often a losing game. It's a game where you're not playing to win, you're playing to prevent the other team from winning. And you add all that in, stack that up over multiple years, and it has severe, prolonged psychological effects on people. So I don't necessarily see it as, I agree with it being a disease or some type of sickness from a medical perspective. We should treat it like that. But I see it as more, if you stick your hand in a beehive, you're going to get stung. If you put a person in a security operations center for a long period of time, they're going to get paranoid. They're going to develop sleep issues. Their back is going to start hurting, and their eyes are going to be strained. Like, it's just part of it. It's just part of the trade-off you make when you take a career in this field.
Yeah.
So that's how I see it.
Do people know? I mean, so for the people listening to this, right, who are not maybe hugely familiar with the inner workings of a security operations center or a SOC, right? So our jargon, what you just described, so paranoia, sleep issues, back pain, neck pain, shoulder pain, so there's tension stored in your body, eye strain. Like, that's not a good, it's not a good advertisement for cybersecurity, right?
No, recruiters do not lead with that. Recruiters do not start off with, hey, you young person who's interested in computers and likes breaking things, do you want persistent back and knee problems and bad eyesight for the rest of your life? Do you want to develop crippling paranoia that makes you change all your passwords? And no one sells it like that. But
don't forget insomnia, by the way, because of the staring at the screens.
The insomnia, that never goes away. that's permanent. If you're considering a career in it, except these are the issues you're going to develop and you will live with for probably the rest of your life. But yeah, I mean, just look at it. It's weird because I don't think even we within our own community, like not only do outsiders not accept it, I don't think we within our own community accept it. I mean, John McAfee, right? He was in the news recently. We don't need a deep dive on him, but he's not alone in being a cybersecurity researcher that lost their mind. Eventually, you have the guy who developed the Riser file system. You have John McAfee. You have Craig Wright, the guy who's claiming he invented Bitcoin and is
Satoshi.
basically, yes, yeah, he's claiming to be Satoshi. And I mean, it's weird. Like we all dismiss that fake Satoshi, but if you go look right now on the SANS top most frequently read papers, he's still he's still up there in like the top 10 last time I checked. Like you might be trading your mind, you know, if you do this game long enough, especially if you're not prepared for it. And I think that's where some of the earlier people made the mistakes, is they didn't know the type of trade-off they were making. It's different now.
I mean, it comes down then to basically the fact that we as a community, but also the employers, the organizations that we work for, we just don't discuss mental health, and we don't discuss how we get into those kind of situations, but also not how we get out of those situations again. It immediately becomes sort of a conversation stopper. Usually, if you say, I have a burnout, or I have a depression, or I have any other type of mental health issue, which not necessarily can be a permanent thing. It can also just be a very situational thing, which you can get out of within a couple of months again. But what I've seen in the last couple of years is that we just don't guide people. We are not open about it, and we just don't bring different perspectives in to really ensure that people who are troubled, people who are affected by those kind of things, actually get the help that they need.
I think another.
Oh, sorry, Faith. Go ahead. No.
Sorry, I think another reason is the expectations that are set in front of us, and especially an example is if you have a manager who works frantically, right? You as an employee will be forced to work like that.
Yeah.
But everyone has different limits, right? And none of us want to be seen as the underdogs, right? We want to be seen as top performers. And if let's say your manager is overworking, it means that, okay, then that's how the performance is measured. So I also have to overwork. And I keep doing it until I cannot do it anymore. And that's when the burnout comes. So also that role modeling is very crucial. Yeah. And what were you going to say?
No, it was just a question. Faith, have you worked in a SOC? I know Jennifer has.
I've worked in technical assistance center, and trust you me, it's the same thing.
Okay. So a question for the three of you, right? Which is, so Andrew, you were talking about, you know, the paranoia. It's just a curiosity on my part. What is it, right? You've got somebody who comes in, they're trained, they start getting to a level of performance where they're, you know, managing their job. What is happening that it starts kind of altering their mind? What is it that they're seeing and doing that starts messing with their mind? And if you're a colleague or a manager, what maybe should you be on the lookout for to say, that's a red flag, we need to keep an eye on that person?
I think it starts, you know, in cybersecurity, we're trained to look at systems, right? We're looking at systems all day, every day. And when I say system, I mean it in the more general term, not necessarily like a physical piece of hardware, but how does this whole organization function? How do these different components relate to each other? How do they work? And then as cybersecurity people, we start thinking of, well, how can these things break? How can they be tricked into doing the wrong thing? And so your brain starts to see everything as like this system that has rules. And if you understand the rules, once you understand the rules, now you start thinking, how does the system break? And when you have now in the Security Operations Center, a constant source of information coming in saying, here's a way someone found how to break this system. Here's a way how someone found to break this system. You start losing faith in like all of these different systems around you, and you start perceiving like, one of the things I got told earlier on in my SOC career was stop paying attention to the organization, just focus on the tech. And the problems that we were facing had nothing to do with technology. It had everything to do with organizational dysfunction. And I'm an analyst. I look at the data that's available to me. And if I don't see problems here, I'm going to look somewhere else.
Yeah.
And it pointed back at the organization time and time again. And now I think that mentality has changed a bit. Like now we have multiple different disciplines, and cybersecurity does look at the overall organization. But in the earlier days, it was considered a pure technical focus, right? You were just looking at the technology. The technology is the problem, not the people, not the processes. And I don't think there is really anything you can do to kind of stop it. I mean, when you tell a human being, sit in a chair, study a system for 12 hours a day, they're going to do that. It's going to become second nature, and it's going to get more and more difficult for them to turn it off. But at the same time, that's kind of a good thing, because that's what you're paying them to do. You want to pay them to think about these systems. You want to pay them to think about how to break them, right? That's how they bring value to your organization. So it's a weird trade-off, kind of like how I would imagine most doctors, if they meet someone and they see like a weird rash, they don't go, oh, that's a weird brash, that's a weird brash, I'm just going to move on with my life. They see it and think, I wonder what that is. They start diagnosing it. Same with us. It's no different.
But I do think that, yes, the paranoia will always stay there, because you're trained to do that, you're educated to do that, and that will just stay up to a certain level of available in your mind. What I do think is that you can change the environment in which the SOC analyst, the security employee, is actually working in, because my experience in the SOC was actually rather different. We were still building up at the time, but we were working in a room which was like upper level. We had windows which showed us the time of day, basically. We had daylight in our room, proper seating, proper screens to look at, which is already way different than what I hear Andrew's experience of. And I do think that if you have that kind of an environment, and also have, for example, regular breaks, you're forced to either go on a walk or something, then that already kind of breaks the paranoia, so to say, a little bit more down, and also provides the analyst a little bit more rest, so to say.
Yeah. My experience with it was not with burnout, but my experience in Technical Assistance Center was that I was working in a company that was really growing like this, right? It's a cybersecurity company, stocks were booming, so we're selling a lot of things, but you don't have people. And the customers keep opening cases, and it's case after case after case, and you have very few people. You have customers yelling that this piece of is not working as expected, and you as a technical support engineer, the only thing that you keep thinking of is just that stupid case, because you go to sleep and you're thinking, oh shit, how do I solve that breach issue, or how do I solve that VPN routing issue, and it's every day, right? There's no help, because they say that there are no skilled people, there are no skilled personnel out there that they can hire, which is not really true. At the end of the day, you can get some people to filter some of that, of whatever was coming our way. So yes, I do agree with you, Jennifer, that it depends on the environment, right? Mm-hmm. And what the organizations try to do to change stuff. Yeah. Yes, there's sometimes that they would put an effort, but the effort was just not enough. Yeah. And the people who end up suffering are the people at the grassroots, the security analysts, the technical support engineers, and no one cares about them. No one will come and say, thank you, that you fixed this. It's more of like problem. Show them some appreciation, or show them some, give them something to at least uplift their spirits a little bit.
One thing though, with appreciation and uplifting spirits, we don't just mean one table foosball for the entire department. That's not what we mean here.
Not pizza. Not pizza.
Yeah, can I just want to say something on that about how underappreciated a lot of SOC people are.
Yeah.
I know this might come off as potentially maybe a threat to some people who are watching this in management positions, but I hope you realize that if you're SOC analysts, if you're not treating them well, we live in a world now where if they want to burn everything down behind them, all they have to do one night is just not answer alarms. They can just sit there for 12 hours and let the entire company crumble in front of them. And we're at a 10 to 15% cybersecurity skills shortage. They'll be fine. They'll find another job. I mean, we can't not hire people in this industry where, what is it, out of every 4 jobs that get posted, only 1 that gets filled. We're competing with, I say we as an industry, not a specific employer, but like there's cybersecurity companies that are IPOing now. So there's big dollar signs out there. People are chasing them. You're going to be mean to these people, and they have literally all the keys to the kingdom in their hands for 12 hours a day. It's bad news.
I'm king.
Just saying, by the way, because most of the SOC analysts will not do that because of their moral compass, but it's possible.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's like a risk, right? And it blows my mind. Okay, so I keep saying this. I kind of came into cybersecurity from somewhere else, and I had very few preconceived ideas, and it just blew my mind that there could be these skilled people in a highly important role that would be treated like grunts. And I was there going, how can this be, right? Now, we'd be talking about level 1 and level 2 and level 3 and sort of the hierarchy. And I was going, but why are we talking about level 1 analysts like they're
like some,
industry pariahs? And I've said that this is just not right. And I had the opportunity to interview a group of L1 and L2 analysts, and they were really hesitant at the start. And I go, why is she asking those questions? And after a while, we got a bit of a rapport going, and they were telling me really interesting stuff about their role and their organization. And I said to them, did you ever share this with your management? And they kind of looked at me and went, yeah, we tried, we gave up. And I said, okay. Getting closer to possibly, it's one of the things you mentioned, Andrew, right? It's not the tech, it's the organization dysfunction. And then one of them at the end of it had said to me, thanks. And I was there going, why are you saying thank you to me? It should be me saying thank you to you for your time. And they went, no, you're the first person who ever bothered to ask.
But
that's sad. That's just like so sad.
And unfortunately, that's how it is. You should hear how the leaders talk about analysts, right? It's like there's some that don't belong here, and that's the message that is sent down the chain. If the leaders speak like that, then everyone else, the sales will treat them like, okay, whatever, these are just agents that need to do the dirty work so that we can do the work.
What is it? Is it all about money? Like, is that what's driving it? Cost reduction. We can get rid of these people and like higher margin, more profit. Is that what's behind it?
We can automate it, right?
Well, actually, I have a lot of strong opinions on that. But just when, Andrew, right, you're talking about the human cost, the physical cost to these roles. Through that lens, there is a case to be made for automation, right? Because if the nature of the work is such that it actually destroys people, so you could kind of make a case for saying maybe machines should be doing it.
I don't think it destroys people. I just, like, if you work in carpentry, you're going to get your hands cut from time to time, right? But no, I think you're right. There is a strong case for automating it. The problem is it's it's a classic computer science problem. You're never going to be able to build a computer that knows when it's gone wrong, right? Like it will run forever potentially, right? Yeah. So the exact name of it is escaping me, and I know this is terrible because we're live, but you know, you always will need a human being to look at that computer system and say, is it functioning the way it was designed, or has it gone haywire? And we can always, once we figure out a new way it's gone haywire, we can build a detection or an automation for that, but it will always find a new way to go haywire. I mean, if things didn't find new ways to go haywire, this industry would have been dead 10 years ago. It's, you know, and to answer kind of an earlier question, why is it this way? I think there's many reasons. Funding, money is one of them. I think initially cybersecurity was seen as like an annoying expense that was like, no one really understood really like how important it was, or they thought like eventually it would get solved and it would go away. Like that's been my impression most of my career from non-technical managers, is that eventually this problem will just go away if we ignore it long enough. But I think the other part of it comes from people in the cybersecurity industry that have been doing it for a long time. When they started, it was easier simply because there was less code. There was just less stuff out there. You know, when I started, Docker didn't exist. When I started, cloud wasn't really a thing. It was like this scary idea everyone was talking about. When I started,
virtualization was just starting also.
Yeah, you know, no one was living on their phones. I mean, even 5-6 years ago, the landscape was drastically simpler than what it is now. And so like what we expect out of a tier 1 analyst today is magnitudes more difficult than what we expected out of a level 1 analyst in the same role at the same place 5-10 years ago. And so I think when people moved up and become managers and they see these level 1s struggling, they not only do they forget, but they think, how hard could it be? I was a level 1 just 5 years ago. It's gotten significantly harder. And it's just, they can't see through someone else's experience. No empathy, I guess.
Going back to mental health, how should people deal with it? You know, analysts who are in that particular situation, how should they deal with it to prevent burnouts and to as a reaction to burnout?
I don't think necessarily that burnout needs to be prevented at all costs, because it still can happen also because of external reasons or whatever. I mean, the human mind is relatively fragile. It is what it is. What I do think needs to be in place is that an organization needs to be able to handle it, and also needs to have an open culture with regards to receiving the news from the employee that they are struggling at that moment. So basically just talk about it, be able to talk about it, and also make sure that there are, for example, programs in place that help them to get their way, or at least ensure that they're getting other types of aid where possible.
Would you peeps be comfortable with saying that, hey, I have mental health issues? Would you be comfortable telling your manager that?
Yeah, I did in the past.
Depends on the organization, right? So I think probably for the same reason that you might end up having mental health issues in an organization, well, not just like Jennifer said, right? There can be a multitude of factors, but you might find yourself in a challenging, toxic, hostile work environment. If that's already one of the contributing factors to you having mental health issues, the chances of you feeling safe enough to actually share that you're having mental health issues in that environment, I would say, are pretty compromised. Now, you might find good individuals still in a bad environment, right? So I don't know that there's necessarily a blanket rule. My experience, so I wasn't working when I had my burnout. I was a stay-at-home parent, and a very isolating experience. And I don't know, you know, like I say, I wasn't in a professional environment But I do remember looking out at other people and having this impression that everybody else was absolutely crushing it and living their best life and doing marvelously well while I was sinking.
The Instagram life.
Yeah. And it can be really easy. And that was, 15 years ago, right? That was before the filter of Instagram. So I can only imagine it's even worse now. It doesn't have to be your manager. Like you can, and what I did notice is that once I kind of come out on the other side of a burnout, for some reason, there's something about me that I was kind of attracting conversations with people who were struggling. And I don't know what it is. Like there's just something, and you only need
listen, I guess.
Yeah, maybe, but like it's just I've had like this happen to me 6 or 7 times, and somebody will just kind of approach me and we'll start having a conversation, and I'm totally comfortable now talking about it. I have no shame about it whatsoever. And I would just remember there's always this kind of this look in people's eyes when they're struggling, and suddenly they go, oh wow, somebody else gets it. And it doesn't have to, so my point is, it doesn't have to be your manager. You can find support around you, and you might find that it's a colleague, and it mightn't even be the closest colleagues you have, right? You might end up finding a listening, sympathetic, understanding ear with somebody who's not directly your tribe. You have to find somebody when you are struggling. I think, at least my experience is, staying alone with it just amplifies it.
Yeah.
And trying to find somebody who will just break the isolation.
Mm-hmm. Andrew?
Totally agree.
For me, it's a combination of a bunch of different coping skills. So like one, I don't think it's entirely preventable, but there are ways of coping with this stress and with all of the things that can contribute to a burnout. Some of them are maybe a bit controversial, like if you know as an analyst, it will take me 4 hours to do something. If you tell your management, when you're done with that task in 4 hours, they're going to give you another one. And if it took all of your mental energy to do it in 4 hours, they're going to expect you to do it again in 4 hours. So maybe plan a little buffer time, like give yourself space. Like, I'm not saying lie to your management, but remember, like, just because you can do something in 4 hours doesn't mean that's what you should estimate it at, because you need to take care of yourself, the human being. So plan accordingly, estimate accordingly. I think too many people rush to put as much work on themselves as possible and then burn through it. It doesn't work.
You can't work 100% full time.
Yeah, the whole utilization, are you 100, it's all nonsense. Okay. 99% of this job is reading information. I'm not typing anything down. I'm not communicating with anyone. I'm just taking in information. I don't need to be at my desk to do that. I don't need to, it's taking in and understanding information. I don't necessarily have to be in front of a computer to accomplish that.
Yeah.
So consider alternative ways of taking in the information you need: podcasts, audiobooks, get an e-reader. And if you have a new white paper you have to read, put it on the e-reader, go outside and read it. It's not hard. So that's one way. When it comes to talking to management about it, how do you deal with it when it becomes like, I can't cope with this anymore? That is going to vary significantly depending on the business culture you're in. I've worked in the US, I've worked in the Middle East, and I've worked in Europe. And of all the places, if there was anywhere I would ever feel remotely comfortable about talking about burnout, it's in Europe, especially like in the Netherlands. I didn't even know burnout was a thing. Like it's not really a word that, at least when I was working in the US a few years ago, it's not really a word we have. It's just they're done working, and either they're just a slacker or whatever, or they went on to another job. Like you're either running at 100% or you're damaged goods and you need to be replaced. Like that's basically the perception. And so for me, a lot of the times, like when I left the Navy, it wasn't because I didn't love the job I was doing. I absolutely genuinely loved the job I was doing in the Navy. If I could go back and do just the job, I'd be there in a heartbeat. I left because I got burned out. And I know that now. I got burned out with the culture. I got burned out with all of the non-work related requirements that came with it. And it was just too much. And I was, 22 at the time and burned out. It was a mess, but the job itself I loved. I would happily go back and do that job. But yeah, talking to management, it's going to vary significantly depending on your culture and depending on where you are. And, you know, in the US, if you have that conversation with your management, expect to get fired. Just expect it. You're at an at-will hire. You, if you're lucky, will get a 2 weeks notice.
Yep.
Like, I would say if you're experiencing a burnout, start job hunting and use the transition between job A and job B as your burnout recovery time. You might even get a raise out of it. I mean,
Fuck.
Yeah,
take advantage of it.
Yeah, like if you're gonna burn out, if they're gonna fire you when they realize you've burned out, like that's one of the things that's kind of nice about a SOC is sometimes it can take a couple days before they realize that you've completely given up.
Mm-hmm.
Not in all SOCs, and I'm definitely not recommending that to anyone because your level 2s and your level 3s will notice. They just might not say anything quickly. But yeah, if you're working in cybersecurity in the US and it's not for a really good company that actually does care and take care of its people, like I'm not knocking on this industry, but if you happen to be like a SOC analyst at a bank and you're experiencing burnout, just go ahead and look for another job. Like chances are you're going to get fired. Chances are they're not going to be able to help you. And then now you're out with nothing. And I know it's terrible telling someone you're experiencing burnout, here's more work. I know that's like the worst possible thing you can say, but that might be your only option in some work cultures, in some environments. And, you know, it's an unfortunate reality of the world, you know, we live in.
However, thank goodness that we're in Europe where we can leverage the advantage of being Europeans, I guess. So,
have we got a hopeful note to finish on?
Exactly.
No,
Yes.
I mean the whole point of these
Yes.
podcasts, right, is that we talk about the underbelly, right? So it's fascinating listening to sort of three of you describe things that I haven't lived, right?
Which is good.
Which is which is good. And big differences it looks like on both sides of the Atlantic about how it's dealt with and the approach and things. So, but what are your kind of your closing thoughts on this? Are we at the beginning of the industry awakening, or is the head still very firmly in the sand and we're just going to plow on like we've always done?
I don't think we're anywhere near an industry awakening, right? We've had 2 or 3 cybersecurity companies IPO. Like, I personally think we're in a bubble. It's like there's too much money to be made for us to start having honest conversations. With the ransomware craze that's going on, with the boom of everyone staying at home and figuring out how to do cybercrime, it's not great. It's great for this industry, and there's going to be a lot of money that gets made. But as long as the money's getting made, as long as you can basically, as long as VCs are willing to open up their pocketbooks and write anyone a check for as much money as they want, no, we're not going to have honest conversations. The counter to that, though, is as awful as it might sound, I feel about this industry, right? As much as I like to complain about it, like that's one of my coping mechanisms. I just genuinely like complaining. Like I like pointing out problems. I like breaking
You're an
systems
analyst.
in my head. Yeah, I'm an analyst, and it comes through in weird ways all the time. But I still like this job. I still like this industry. I don't know if I'll always do it. I don't know if it's kind of like I'll be a cybersecurity analyst until I retire. I don't know. Like I hope to have at least 1 or 2 different careers in my lifetime, but I still enjoy it. It's still fun. And there's honestly, like, I said earlier, you know, this is a game of losing, right? You just try to limit the losses. When you do win, and there are wins, it's worth it. Like when you can talk a client down out of a complex situation, when you get that feedback and everyone's like, wow, that was great, you saved us a lot of pain and frustration, it's worth it. I wouldn't say that in the middle of a breakdown, but yeah, there is a good side to it. So don't just look at the negatives.
Yeah.
Faith?
I was going to say that at the end of the day, put yourself first. No one is going to care about you. You are just one person. I won't even call you a person. You're just one agent in a company at the end of the day. So be selfish. I'm not saying that you should not work. Just put yourself first. Know what is good for you and do what is good for you. It's not always about the strategy of the company.
We kind of grew up in, or I was brought up anyway, like selfishness. We kind of conflated selfishness with self-care. We never like talk about self-care, but taking care of yourself sort of was equated with being selfish. And I think that's not the case. Like what you're saying is we are allowed to look out for ourselves, and it's not a bad thing. We are allowed to think of others and think of ourselves. We are allowed to act in our best interests, sort of do no harm. But yeah, and I totally agree. You know, it can sound a bit cynical, but companies, to the extent that they are for profit, the profit in the company's mind is what comes first, right? So you have to hope that you can find a job where the time that you spend in that job means something to you, and that you get some sense of fulfillment out of it at some level, right? It doesn't have to be totally fulfilling, but that you know what you're getting in exchange for your time is your salary and maybe something else. But that thinking about what matters in your life, because every day and every hour, whatever your time that you're spending at work is time that you're not spending on something else. And just keeping that big picture view of your life and what you want out of it. And even if you really, really like your job, there's nothing wrong with that. Great. Just check in with yourself frequently and say, if my life was to end tomorrow, would I be satisfied with what I spent my time on?
Yeah. And even though you like your job, take your breaks, take your holidays.
Your job is not your life.
Exactly. Jennifer?
Yeah, so my final thoughts are, contrary to Andrew's opinion, I actually do see improvement, but not from an organizational standpoint. I think that our generation is way more open about mental health issues than the generations before us. And I am extremely pleased with that, because that makes me feel not alone, because I felt really stupidly alone when I first noticed that I had a burnout. And if you notice that you have bystanders, it just makes it way easier to talk about it, way easier to cope with it, and way easier to get through it, basically. So I do want to end on the positive note. I do see improvement, just not necessarily immediately where it makes the biggest difference.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And with that, are we good for today?
I think we're done, yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we'll have you back.
Absolutely.
And
I love your
anytime.
Discussion points.
Thanks.
And to our subscribers, please like and subscribe. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.